Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's critique of pure reason. I'm Matt here with Patrick, and John's actually joining us. John's a long time away, but he's come back because he moved to Baltimore, but he's visiting New Jersey, and he hasn't been here since like the first Kant study we ever did over a year ago. But he's back. You want to say hello?
Yeah, hey, how we doing, everybody?
John on Kant study. That's so goated. Patrick is here. He's been regularly
Yes.
recurring guest. I think I've only done like one or
Yes.
two Kant studies without him total. So he's been
Yes.
a key
I'm
figure.
barely a guest.
Yeah. Basically, part of the core duo we have going on here. Trying to get Harrison back on. He said he was interested, but he also noticed he was on Instagram at like 4 in the morning, and he's just not responding. So man's probably is
Uh-oh.
EP. He's probably EP right now. So, so
Uh-oh.
we'll-
He's a college student.
yeah. We'll just let that be. All right.
Okay, guys. Let's read.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so just as a little context thing, we're in the transcendental. We were on the schematism. I think now we're actually on the system. We're on the system already. Do you want to take away the reading, Patrick?
Yeah. Okay. There are principles anywhere at all. Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
That
There are principles anywhere at all is to be ascribed solely to the pure understanding, which is not only the faculty of rules in regard to that which happens, but is rather itself the source of principles in accordance with which everything that can come before us as an object necessarily stands under rules. Since without rules, appearances could never amount to cognition of an object corresponding to them. Even laws of nature, if they are considered as principles of the empirical use of the understanding, at the same time carry with them an expression of necessity. Thus, at least the presumption of determination by grounds that are a priori valid prior to all experience. So he's saying basically here that the rules or the principles of the understanding, um, in order to be necessary, must be determined in some way. So it seems like he's saying it needs to be they need to be part of a system, right?
Yeah.
Because
Priority.
rule, yeah, if rule A, right, exists and is valid, it needs to be determined by something else. So we have rule B, which determines something else, right? And it's determined by something else, rule C. And then I guess it's a complete circle. It's not clear to me because it seems like you could do an infinite regress that way, if I'm understanding them correct, unless it's like a circle where all the points each mutually support each other.
Right. Which could be the
I
case,
could
I
be
suppose.
wrong. That's what I'm understanding.
Maybe I was just kind of taking it as like all these rules. I believe the system that he's going to apply to is that of the pure understanding. Is that of like what happens when we bring objects under like the kind of like the how the schematism operates by certain rules once it's like perceived. I don't know. I'm not making much sense. I'm tired, but you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Continue.
yeah. Regardless, we'll see what he means. Hopefully.
But without exception, all laws of nature stand under higher principles of the understanding, as they only apply to the latter.
Apply
Sorry,
the language.
yeah, but they only apply the latter to particular cases of appearance. Thus, these higher principles alone provide the concept, which contains the condition and, as it were, exponents for a rule in general, where experience provides the case which stands under the rule. Oh, he's saying something much more basic.
Okay.
He's just repeating himself again.
Yeah, I figured most of this is
He's talk-
repetition.
yeah, he's talking about like the laws of nature.
Yeah.
For instance,
Being observed. Yeah.
if I take an empirical law like positive and negative poles of magnets attract, right? That stands under the laws of pure experience in general, which are a priori. That's all we say. So
Yeah,
super basic.
yeah. Which are the rules of your understanding, which are part of the
So here's once
synthesis.
again
Yeah,
just reminding us of things you should definitely already know.
yeah. I will pick up this next paragraph. There can really
Okay.
There can really be no danger that one will regard merely empirical principles as principles of pure understanding, or vice versa, for the necessity according to concepts that distinguishes the latter, and whose lack in every empirical proposition, no matter how generally it may hold, is easily perceived, can easily prevent this confusion. There are, however, pure principles a priori that I may nevertheless not properly ascribe to pure understanding, since they are not derived from pure concepts, but rather pure intuitions, although by means of the understanding. The understanding, however, is the faculty of concepts. Mathematics has principles of this sort, but their application to experience, thus their objective validity, indeed the possibility of such synthetic a priori cognition, its deduction, still always rests on the pure understanding.
Can we
So,
get a going?
sure. Can I ask what for?
It
Is
seems like we're
repetition?
that we're just repeating ourselves here.
Yeah. Although I did find this to be a nice, like, maybe it's just because we've been away from the study for a while, but I found this to be
That's
a
true.
nice, like, kind of summation of, nice
That's
reminder.
true.
But time aside, I'm sure if you were reading this straight through, which God bless you, first of all. Second of all, uh, yeah, you probably get pretty annoyed at the amount of repetition. Uh,
All right. Continuing.
uh, Hence, I will not. Oh, sorry, I was going to finish that up and let you read
Yeah,
the
sure.
next big one. Hence, I will not count among my principles those of mathematics, but I will include those on which the possibility and objective a priori validity of the latter are grounded, and which are thus to be regarded as the principles of these principles, and that proceed from concepts to the intuition, but not from the intuition to the concepts. So, yes, once again, laws are not found in intuitions, they're found in concepts and are applied to objects and obviously of nature and even mathematics all.
So, really simple. The point he was coming to is math is not of the pure understanding. It is of synthetic a priori cognition, which relies on pure intuition. He's simply talking about the pure understanding. So,
Yep,
okay.
there we go. Pick up the next
In the application of the pure concepts of understanding to possible experience for the synthesis in either mathematical or dynamical. Oh, hold on. In the application of the pure concepts of the understanding to possible experience, the use of their synthesis is either mathematical or dynamical, for it pertains partly merely to the intuition, partly to the existence of an appearance in general.
Mhm.
The a priori conditions of intuition, however, are necessary throughout in regard to a possible experience, while those of experience of the objects of possible empirical intuition are in themselves only contingent. Hence, the principles of the mathematical use will be unconditionally necessary, i.e., apodictic, while the principles of dynamical use, to be sure, also carry with them a character of a priori necessity, but only under the condition of empirical thinking in an experience, thus only mediately and indirectly. Consequently, these do not contain the immediate evidence that the characteristic of the former, though their universal certainty in relation to experience is not thereby injured, um, do not contain the immediate evidence. I see. That is characteristic of the former, though their universal certainty in relation to experience is not thereby injured. I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Yet this will be better judged at the conclusion of the system of principles. Hold on, I've got to sneeze.
All right.
Okay,
Let's
we're still
see.
back. This is a
We
good
are
work.
yes. This is new. This is lots of material.
Okay, I do remember this distinction being one of actually the clearest distinctions I could understand in like the later part of Kant's system,
Yes.
which is the mathematical dynamical distinction,
Hmm.
which is worth noting as
Yeah.
kind of, I think, explains why someone like Hume arrives at his problematization of causation,
Yeah.
right?
This is a new thing for me. I haven't ran into this before, so I'm gonna let you
But
totally.
I do remember this, and I do remember actually even understanding this part the first time around.
Yeah, I think I understand it, but I'm gonna. You seem to have just more experience, so for the
Yeah.
sake of like the
So,
YouTube explanation.
mathematical and dynamical principles of of well intuition, right? Mathematical and dynamical pure syntheses, right? Something is a mathematical principle if it relates to the intuition, and a dynamical principle if it relates to the existence, is what he says. Now, what does that mean? I think it would have been helpful to include an example.
Yeah.
Mathematical principles can tell you the principle of a triangle, but in asserting the principles of a triangle, it nowhere asserts that there actually is such an object. Of course, we see triangular objects, but we wouldn't have to, right?
Yes.
In
Oh, that's what he
mathematics,
means
right?
by contingent.
Sometimes there
Okay.
are like perfectly regular polygons with 8,327 sides.
Yeah, and you're never gonna see that in nature
Nothing
again.
like that really exists. Nothing like that really exists. And yet we can make absolutely true statements about that because, right, they concern not actually existent things, but rather the mere form of intuition.
And for
This
Kant,
is
the
what Hume
existence.
calls, yeah, this is what Hume calls relations of ideas and why he admits these mathematical truths
Yes.
immediately.
Mhm.
You simply know, to take it back to the triangle, based on the relation of line to line to line and angle to
But
angle to angle, you can make a calculation that a triangle has 180 degrees is the sum of all of its angles, for example. And that's simply a relation of ideas. It is not a matter of fact in Humean terms. It is not a question of whether the triangle actually exists or not. It simply pertains to what Kant calls the intuition. In other words, the form, the way it could appear before us. On the other hand, a dynamical principle, right, relates to the existence.
yes.
And the example par excellence of a dynamical principle for Kant is, of course, cause and effect. The
Yes.
very thing that Hume is
Mhm.
so confused about. How do I
Yeah.
get this idea? Well, the reason Kant says that principles of mathematics appear so immediately a priori is because you don't have to have reference to any possible experience or the conditions of possible experience or any of that. You don't have to do any of this like transcendental analysis of your faculties or whatever to
Yeah.
see that, hey, look, if any way I construct a triangle, it's going to have 180 degrees in all of its angles, right? Now, so those dynamical principles, he says, do still have an a priori necessity. And it's still just as valid, just as apodictic is the word he uses. And
Mhm.
in Cartesian terms, certain is fine.
Yep.
Every time he uses the word apodictic, just say certain.
Mhm.
That's all you really need.
Yeah. I mean, German academic lingo.
Unnecessarily academic language. But but uh, returning, um, dynamical principles do not have their certainty really in themselves. They don't immediately appear, but rather in reference to a possible experience, which Hume is not considering. So that's really the explanation of what's going down there, right? The
Yeah.
difference
That's
between
that's really.
mathematical and dynamic principles,
Yeah.
and why that difference leads to them being perceived differently and led to the problem of causation immediately.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really clear to me. I guess if you have questions, leave us a comment. Um, amazing. Okay, and then at the end here. It just says the table of categories gives us entirely natural direction for the table of principles, since these principles are nothing other than the rules of the objective use of the categories. All principles of pure understanding are accordingly axioms of intuition, anticipations of perception, analogies of experience, and postulates of empirical thinking in general. I have chosen these titles with care. Thank you, Colin. In order not to leave unnoted the distinctions with respect to the evidence and the exercise of these principles. But it will soon be shown that as far as the evidence as well as a priori determination of appearances according to the categories of magnitude and quantity are concerned, if one attends solely to the form of the latter, huh?
Quality, not quantity.
Yeah, that's what I said. Sorry if the microphone picked it up weird. Magnitude and quality are concerned. If one attends solely to the form of the latter, their principles are importantly distinct from those of the two others. While the former are capable of an intuitive certainty, the latter are capable only of a discursive certainty, uh, though in both cases they are capable of a complete certainty. I will therefore call the former the mathematical principles, or the mathematical, and the latter dynamical principles. So magnitude is mathematical, quality is dynamic. Quality having to do with existence, magnitude having to do with what human would call relations of ideas. Uh, oh, and we have a little table here. So this may be helpful for you. I'm not going to go into this because it kind of just. Well, I guess these are examples of what we were talking about, but yeah, that's fine. You can see that on the screen. I will let you guys just look at that. But one should note well that I here have in mind the principles of mathematics just as little in the one case as the principles of general physical dynamics in the other, but rather have in mind only the principle of the pure understanding in relation to the inner sense, which I'm guessing is time in this case, without distinction of the representations which are given therein, through which, with the former principles, all acquire their possibility. I am therefore titling them more with respect to their application than on account of their content, and I now proceed to the consideration of them in the same order in which they are represented in the table.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the mathematical principles, and then we're
Yes,
going to move on to the dynamical principles.
cool. And you should know what those are. Refer to this table, I guess, from the first edition, according to the translator, just giving us this. So in the mathematics, you have the axioms of intuition, pure mathematics, and applied mathematics. Um,
Which, by the way, since it's been a while,
yeah.
Schopenhauer has a very interesting narrative in which the first edition is like the real edition of the critique.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's so funny. I just remember
Yeah.
that like as soon as you mentioned it. That is so funny. Yeah, because
I don't think it's ridiculous because um,
yeah,
Frederick the Great did die, and there was like concerns about like what Kant was saying, and he makes a significant argument that Kant was forced to like modify his doctrine or
yeah,
pressure to like step back a little bit from what he was saying in later editions.
yeah, that is interesting. I wonder what like scholars say about that as well.
Because I mean, he makes a really, really interesting point to me, and this is
You're
something I
right.
didn't
No,
consider
I know what you're
as someone
talking
living
about.
in the states when he talks about how there's basically no overlap between a teacher of philosophy, a philosophy professor, and like a great philosopher. And I think that goes much more for his time than ours because he says specifically the exception to Frederick the Great, the reason why Kant was able to be a philosophy professor and also a great philosopher was that the king was also a philosopher. But otherwise, right, if you're employed by the state, you have to serve the state. Now, of
Hegel.
course, in the United States, that's not really how it
Yeah.
works. So, um, as us living in the United States, I don't think that I think that we're much more in a situation like Kant is, very fortunately. So I think philosophy professors are much more likely to be good philosophers in the modern day than they were historically, right?
Yeah.
Spinoza, for example, did not like refused to accept a chair in philosophy, and none of the other major philosophers, except for Kant, in the early modern period, were teachers of philosophy. And of course, that's originally where the term sophist comes from.
Yeah, from teacher. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So, I mean, you could argue that the philosophy professors today are more like the traditional Greek sophists in democracy, but we have a lot of safeguards that make it different, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why
They don't just walk around on the street being like, want to learn
that's why
rhetoric?
we have stuff like a complex constitution and a law and systems. Like our government
Yeah.
was designed by political philosophers, and they
Yeah.
they kind of wanted
Enlightenment
the freedom.
thinkers who were very
So
anti-sophist. So
God bless
yeah,
America.
man, at least in
Yeah.
that regard, yes, yes, I will agree with you there. Uh,
But I'm gonna call out carefree wandering.
wait, what?
I'm totally calling out carefree wandering for his bullshit though. On that note,
Wait,
if
what?
you
What are
ever
you
seen
talking about?
if you've ever seen or you ever wander across a channel called Carefree Wandering,
Oh, that's a
which I
YouTube
used to be
channel.
in, yeah, YouTube channel. I
Yeah.
used to be interested. He talks about Kant. He talks about Hegel. He
Oh,
talks about Taoism also, right?
I've
Um,
never seen that.
but I realized that I have to stop taking him seriously because he is employed by the Chinese state.
Ah!
Like, like he put out a video after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, talking about beyond the pariah principle and like criticizing sanctions. And at that point, I realized, no, I can't
Yeah.
take you. You're a shill. You're a shill.
He's hailing the CCP. Yeah.
You're a philosophy professor working for the CCP. It doesn't matter. Like very clever. You're a German guy. You're talking about Kant. You're a shill.
Yeah. Gotta get a breath for that.
Beware of shills.
Yeah.
Beware of shills. Kant was pressured into being a shill, is Schopenhauer's argument, and that's why the first edition is better. And I personally found it probably pretty convincing. I would have to look into it more
Yeah.
in that particular
I was gonna
instance.
say I've never really compared both editions like probably Schopenhauer did. So like in depth, I've never read the. Well, Schopenhauer's in a position where he like probably read the first edition,
He did.
like and then read the second. Well, I was gonna say maybe did it come out? No, but both editions were out by the time Schopenhauer was doing philosophy. So he probably really. I was gonna say maybe he like waited for the second one to drop, and I remembered like what time he was at, and I think the second edition was already out by the time he was actively doing philosophy. So
Which, by the way, general statement, if you get done Kant and then proceed to not read Schopenhauer, what
oh,
are
that's
you
an L.
doing?
That's a big L. That's a big L.
That is a huge
I
L.
mean, don't get me wrong.
All the difficult work that like leads you there. Schopenhauer is the best expositor of Kant, and he makes like what is absolutely necessary and what was vital in Kant so crystal clear.
Yeah,
And
and better, and better. Yeah,
but 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 like
yeah,
if you don't read Schopenhauer when you get done with this and you do put all this work and you don't go on and read The World is Will and Representation, Volume 1, and the appendix concerning Kant, don't even
yeah,
bother with the last two.
yeah, yeah,
But seriously, statement, if you I mean, even a part of me wants to say that, like, if you get confused right now, you might want to go back to the fourfold root or particular things that Schopenhauer says, because he can make some of this stuff so clear.
yeah. Kant writing L, Schopenhauer W.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would just encourage reading of the German idealists in general. It's just such a fascinating, interesting, insightful area of philosophy, the likes of which I've just not really seen before, and that's not always a compliment. Some of it is some like the biggest bullshit I've ever seen, but a lot of it too is just so like it's just like nothing else. It's so unique, and if you just like if you're here, you like philosophy. It's probably safe to say. So, or at least at the very least, deciding whether or not, and just German idealism for both those purposes is so interesting and will provide you so much material. Um, yeah, it's really unlike any other philosophy I've ever done, and that's why I'm going to grad school for it. God, rip my wallet. On that note, the Kantian advice of the day. don't.
read Schopenhauer.
Yes, read Schopenhauer. That's like the meta Kantian advice of the day. If I had to pick something from the material, I would probably say don't confuse your mathematical and dynamical systems. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
may be inclined to make some whack judgments. Um, yeah. I was gonna say you also probably run into like antinomies if you like, but also you're gonna do that anyway necessarily, as we'll see later in the
Yeah,
critiques.
it actually isn't an antinomy.
Um, well,
When Hume puts forward the problem of causation, so an antinomy, right, is when you try to take the principles of the understanding and apply them dialectically beyond the objects of possible experience.
all right. So wouldn't that be like applying a mathematical thing to trying to apply it to like a dynamical thing, and it's just contradiction dialectic?
Well, no, that would be a contradiction, but it wouldn't be properly what he calls an antinomy.
Oh, okay. Well,
But actually, what that is what Hume does. As a matter of fact, he
yeah.
applies
Well,
it.
that's what I was trying to say. Don't do that. This is my kind of advice of the day. I guess I just
But
misuse the
it's
word
still not an
antinomy.
antinomy. He
Yeah, I
doesn't
probably
call that
misuse.
an antinomy
Yeah,
because he gives like a very specific name to what an antinomy
yeah.
is. So antinomies are always dogmatic, never skeptical.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this study. We will get there. I mean, I could just look ahead, but like, it'll probably just make much more sense if I just go in order, especially with a freaking insanely
Yeah,
difficult
if
to
you
read book
if you
like this.
confuse mathematical and dynamical principles, you're going to wind up in
Skepticism,
skepticism.
yeah. So
You will wind up in dogmatism.
don't be a skeptic, nor be a dogmatist, as especially Fichte would argue. But don't be a skeptic either. In terms of mixing up your mathematical and dynamical uh, judgments, I guess would be the
Yeah.
cognitions, whatever. No, not
Prim-
cognitions. Principles. Alrighty. On that note, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for axioms. Well, we're going to be going through the various mathematical principles, and then we're going to be going to the dynamic ones. So we'll see you next time for at least the first one, axioms of intuition. Uh, cool.
yeah.
Peace out.
Yeah.